ask Bill about his writing method.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you go about it? Let's take a comic book series. How do you begin? Do you outline?
Uh, Starting a comic book series, or we're
Yeah.
deep into it.
No, when you're asked to say, "Okay, Bill, we want a 5-issue arc of whomever," how do you go about that?
Yeah, 5 issue probably requires an outline because then there's structure involved. My preferred method of writing comics is to begin at page one, panel one, and just write it seat of the pants. But that presumes, I know it's a
Right.
terrible method,
Well,
and I do not recommend it.
that's how I
presumes
wrote
that,
comics for 15 years.
yeah, that's like how it's. I imagine that this series is going to run for years, and so
Right.
I'll eventually be able to get into stuff that I want. It's odd that I tend not to really feel comfortable in a series until several issues in, and then I begin to feel like I know who these characters are and what the thing is, and so I give very bad uh, first issues. I'm in awe of those people that can write a good, tight first issue that identifies who these people are and sets up the situation in a clear way. That's not among my strengths. I try, but
I've thought about
mostly I
that
just,
method a lot,
yeah,
and what's important about it, and it's good because you focus on the moment, the first panel, and you want to grab the reader, you want to interest him, but as soon as you're done with that panel, you're forced to think of what happens next,
yes,
and that's the essential question in all fiction: what happens next? And at the same time, you have a diagram in your head, a dynamic of how the story has to unfold, uh, because every story is a dynamic narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's got to have those beats, it's got to have lulls.
yes,
Sometimes it's intense, sometimes it's languid. It depends on the needs of the story.
yeah. I as a reader, um, the what happens next is the ultimate page turning motivation. And what I need as a reader is confidence that even if there's mysteries and there's things not yet revealed and the things that will be revealed, confidence that whoever's telling me the story knows what happens next. And when that isn't there, uh, let's use the third episode of Lost, for example, which is when they lost me. Um, when I have zero confidence that they know what's going on, and they're just making this stuff up as they go. Seat of the pants writing does not mean making it up as you go. It means I've got confidence that I know where I'm going, and I don't write it down. One of the reasons I try not to outline too much is that I like the spontaneity of that first take on something. Nothing dries out my story like having to work out all the beats and stuff like that in advance. Um, DC, I know you've done work for DC. I have. They, no matter what the series, they wanted beat sheets of the next six months coming up, which I was terrible at. And then I found out that those make no difference whatsoever. The editor has to have it to hand over to whomever. I don't think anyone in the process ever reads them, because that was also the process in wherein like a big sprawling uh, thing like the DC universe. If you're going to use characters, etc., villains, you need to reserve the right to them to make sure there's no conflict. So that's where you would do it in these beat sheets. You would say, okay, I'm going to need this character and this character, and this character, and I've never had a successfully reserved villain and or character where someone didn't say, "Oh, no, 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 we never said you could use this character." Well, you had you had my so-called that was the only reason I agreed to do that silly beat sheet stuff, knowing that you weren't really paying attention to
Very
this.
few
So
novelists write without an outline. Elmore Leonard was one, and of course he was very successful. Peter
yeah,
Branvold, the Western writer, is another. But most novelists use outlines, and Ken Follett's outlines are extremely detailed, and they run from 100 to 300 pages.
Ken Follett is oh my goodness, what an amazing. Um, my girlfriend has just discovered Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, things like the real big
Oh
bone
wow.
stopper epics of his,
Yeah.
and uh, those things are incredible. Well, I've not uh, I've not gotten into them yet. They're on my to read list, but I am finding out that so much of what made it into Game of Thrones uh, is in there too, with I think a little bit of Shogun. Not entirely sure, but yeah, I can't imagine doing anything like that
I
without
can't either,
without an outline.
because
Um,
we don't write books that big. But another thing, which is that you create a credible character, and at some point, the character is going to turn around and tell you what happens next.
yeah, or or at least strongly
Yeah.
attempt to guide you in that direction. When I write comics now, with something like Fables that was going, went for 150 issues. Um, when I get to the point where I think I know where I'm going, uh, I guess I write an outline in the sense that uh, a new issue, I will just write the dialogue. I write it as a stage play or a radio play or whatever. No panel direction, not one thing, because uh, I've gotten to the point where I feel like I trust that when I go back to do all the boring stuff like panel description and so on, uh, that just the dialogue will remind me what I envisioned happening at this thing, and because of that, uh, since in my mind the dialogue is the important thing, um, that's where I work it like you would an outline. Does this structurally fit into the 22 and then the 20 and the whatever number of pages I have to do this? Can I get us to this point in the story by the end of this issue? All of that can be worked out in the dialogue, and then I just go in and do the boring stuff of plugging in panel description.
It's essential to give the artist complete dialogue up front, I believe. You can't just say, oh, I want 6 pages of fights like Stan Lee used to do
Ah,
or whatever, and then I'll add the dialogue afterwards. Uh, because the dialogue is crucial to the story if it's done right. It's not superfluous. It reveals character. It often advances the plot, and often it entertains. And the artist has to see that
right.
to know how to draw the scene.
And if the dialogue doesn't entertain, that's that's horrible. And if it doesn't advance the plot, that's unforgivable. I mean, you can't. If Why is the dialogue there if it doesn't advance the plot? And uh, if it is if it has nothing whatsoever to do with the plot, unless you're specifically doing the dialogue to go against the plot, almost like a unreliable narrator.
Unreliable. Yeah.
What is happening is in counterpoint to what is being discussed. Sometimes that works. I mean, in the opening scenes of Pulp Fiction, where they're on their way to assassinate kids with the magic briefcase, and their dialogue is all about living in Amsterdam and going to McDonald's and things like that. That can be charming and interesting and give you insights into the characters. It tells you that this is not the first time they've shown up to kill someone. This is old hat to them. But a little of that goes a long way. I mean, you can't. That's kind of a gimmick almost that you best not overuse. Um, you have to advance the plot with it, with maybe the admonition that you don't do like old time comics writing that had bad printing. They had contempt for their audience was idiot children that if they weren't morons, they would be reading real books. So they would triple reinforce the plot. It's like Spider-Man in the image is leaping, swinging in through a room and landing on the floor. Then you have the caption that says Spider-Man swings in through the window and lands on the floor. And then you have at least someone in the room say, I can't help but notice that Spider-Man just swung into the window and landed on the floor. And that kind of, I guess the dialogue advances the plot, but by that time it's like, okay, you truly don't trust any particular aspect of this.
That violates the second rule of storytelling, which is show, don't tell.
Which is show, don't tell. Which I want to say is I don't want it to sound like when I put in the panel description that that's a throwaway bit of the storytelling, because the show and don't tell in prose, a writer has to be a artist with the dialogue and an artist with the exposition. In comics, your artist is also your exposition if you're doing it right. If if you have a trusting relationship and if you know that the artist is actually going to show the things that he needs to show, and so you don't do double duty on what they're doing. But the reason I started doing all dialogue first and then going back is that you have to be kind of a Jekyll and Hyde when you're writing comics, and I'm sure you've figured this out, that in the dialogue and such, you need to be as much an artist as possible. It needs to be crisp and good and cool, and everything in your skill set has to be in there. But with the panel descriptions, which are just as important, you have to switch gears, to the technical writer. That is basically your job is to write stereo assembly instructions in a clear way so that no one can mistake what is required in this panel and what's required in this panel. And that's a real, I can't just write dialogue and then a panel description and switch, from the one guy writer to the other guy writer, the technical to the artist, back and forth. That's too Jekyll. I need to, a little bit of the artist writing, and then if I find, I'll take a break, then I can go back and be that kind of dry, technical writer who is writing one message, and that's to the artist. Yeah, the editor's going to see it and all that kind of stuff, but they're, mostly idiots. The artist needs to understand what's going on there and be able to faithful. And all the artistic aspect of that storytelling, that's on his plate. You need to structure the story so that it does, tell a story by the end of it. As an artist, both, I know that artists are superstitious and lazy guys who will cut corners right and left. Now, there are
a superstitious and cowardly lot.
Yes, yeah.
And they have deadlines too, so.
And they have deadlines, and plus, it's like, what do I feel like drawing?
Right.
I've gotten so many artists that it's like, well, I could tell that you just felt like drawing this instead of what needed to be done. That's that happens, but you get a good one. Like I worked with Mark Buckingham for 150 issues of Fables, which in modern times, I mean, back in the Kirby days, you'd get these runs on comics that are amazing.
Right.
Nexus just blew me away on the just. I have no idea what your working relationship was other than it worked, because although at first the very first two issues, how many of the Capital issues were black and white before you guys?
Three.
Yep.
So the first three issues were available at Forbidden Planet when I was trying to break into comics and and beginning to discover that Marvel and DC were not going to immediately welcome me into the fold. So I started looking at the kind of new independent movement, um, and I kept looking at it. It took me 2 or 3 trips into the city to decide to buy it because his artwork looked odd to me. I could tell it was a kind of a superhero thing, but it was very quirkily drawn. I did with Steve Root exactly what I'd done with Alex Toth and other just outright geniuses, which is, it's simple, it's elegant. There's not a lot of stuff there. It leaves a lot for you to figure out, and I didn't understand that was really what you want. I like the artists that lots of stuff going on with Kirby crackle and lots of lines and this and it took me a while to realize just how wonderful this stuff was.
I was in Phoenix 2 weeks ago with the dude signing copies of his magnum opus, Gormando, and I saw the pages of his upcoming work, uh, and it's amazingly detailed and complex.
Yeah.
You know that about 15 years ago, he started rejecting my scripts.
Oh, really?
And decided he could write it. So we're doing a 2-tier track. I have a bunch of Nexus material coming out with other artists,
Uh-huh.
and dude is publishing his own material.
I have noticed that there is. Was it part of someone else's Indiegogo campaign that whatever you got included?
Yeah, Richard Meyer. That was a Kelsey Shannon. It's the first issue. Let me just hold that up. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he did a brilliant job. I mean, it's just brilliant. It's not the dude, but it's got an overwhelmingly positive reception. There'll be 2 more issues in this series, and then Dark Horse is going to reprint it. But I also have a bunch of material coming out from Dark Horse.
Oh yeah. So are you and Steve Root each doing your own take on the character? Is that?
That's right.
That's the way to do it. The first time I encountered that as a way to go about it is Dave Sim with Service, which is his attitude was, if you're part of this, if you're part owner, it's not like you each own 50% and any of you could keep the other guy from doing what he wants. You each own 100%. And if Gerhard wanted to split off and do his own version, that's great. If I do my own version, and when I tried to get Sim to draw a Fables story once, which was he's on my list of someday wouldn't be great to work with. He had to make this deal with DC, even though I owned it as like DC, like, oh my God. So anyway, they could not get past the idea that, okay, I'll do this, but that means you guys can reprint the story anytime you want, and I can reprint the story anytime I want. And they just that's even when I just said, come on, let them do it. It's a 3-page story, why not? It never happened, but I love that. I love that idea that you build something together. And one of my pauses. I'm sorry, going off on tangents here.
It's fine.
One of my pauses was working with a new artist on something where it should be totally creator owned, and if it's creator owned, that means the writer and the artist both own it. Is that if, as will often happen, an artist flakes out, or let's say a writer flakes out to whoever, and so this thing you spent too long putting together just kind of like disappears at some point. Well, if you both own 100% rather than 50% each or whatever, then you can go on and find the artists that will actually work with you and whatever, because whatever that first artist produced, he can reprint it, if he does. The idea is if the guy's a flake, and I speak from experience, I have been the flake artist so often in my career. If the guy's a flake, he's never going to get around to. You don't have to worry about him coming out with the super competitive. He gets the movie deal that you were just about to set up because the flake is built in. It's a wonderfully elegant working solution. It's it's weird creative politics in its Gordian knot form. It's like, we gotta solve this. Let's just cut right through the bullshit of it, and now we've solved the problem.
Well, especially if you've done something and you've established the character so firmly as they have after that many issues, and that you have that much stuff, then it's definitely, I would say it's easier to do that and be able to say, okay, you do your version, I'm doing my version,
Right.
than when you're starting out doing something together at the beginning, because then that just, you just
Think
butt
of
heads.
all the wonderful comic books that have gone away just because they were created by a couple of guys that could not get back together
Right.
on something. Just
Yep.
leave it to chance, which is the first
Yep.
time I was ever up for an Eisner. It was Coventry.
Oh wow.
And as soon as I saw that it was Best New Series, as soon as I saw that it was in competition with both Leave It to Chance from James Robertson and Paul Smith, and Barry Windsor Smith's Storyteller, I just, why even bother to show up to the thing? I did. I showed up, but I knew there's not a chance, and that did well so far, and then kind of went away, and I'm not sure why. But it would have been nice if just whoever didn't want to keep doing it, if the other one did, I would have been very happy. And I got to tell you, Mike, I'm going to read your Nexus. I'm going to read Steve's Nexus, and be prepared to be thoroughly happy as a result. Oh, say something so that you're
This is Nexus. No,
That's
this is
the book.
Steve's new book.
Yeah.
And he originally printed this the size of an old-fashioned Sunday supplement.
Really?
And it was impossible to ship. It was impossible to rack. So he took a big bath on that, and he finally decided to remarket it in a marketable book. And the artwork is great. It was designed to be much bigger than this.
Yeah.
And in fact, the book I was signing down in Phoenix was the deluxe artist version, which is this big. It's hardbound. Right. It weighs 10 pounds and it costs $150.
Yeah, I'd buy it in a second. Are they still available?
Oh, you bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to find out how to get that, because that's
SteveRude.com.
Yeah.
I miss the big form stuff, the Sunday funnies. I loved it when DC did their Wednesday funny or Wednesday, whatever. But even that wasn't in format big enough, probably for the same reasons. It's like, how do we get these shipped and in comic shops and things like that? So many gripers along the way. And there was a brief trend. Do you remember when everyone was trying the comic that it had the right number of pages? Basically, it was a comic that was printed and never cut at the printer, so that the first page is a normal size comic page. Then you open it up, and it is a double size thing. But then you open it up, and then it's 4 pages worth. And you finally open it up that it's like, and now you have this huge thing. And then you structure your story so that it fits this.
Yeah.
I was delighted by these things, and they lasted just a second. Just like they were gone.
Never saw one.
And yeah, no one wanted to buy them. No one understood them. But just the joy of learning to tell a story in that format, where it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, imagine a movie where the screen just gets bigger and bigger throughout. Anyway.
When you started out, were you only doing art like back at like Dungeons and Dragons time or
Yeah, I
whatever?
started in the in the 80s. First with the comic book ads in the back of Marvel Comics advertising Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
But back then, there was almost nothing. There was no internet.
Right.
The Joe Kubert School existed, but I didn't know of it. There was no way for me to figure out how comics are done.
Right.
So you kind of, at that stage, you figure out on your own. Must work like this, must work like this. So the one thing I thought I knew was I wanted to write comics, I wanted to draw comics, but apparently you had to pick one. You break in as an artist, you break in as a writer. So I picked art. It was more work, but easier to break in that as many editors have confirmed to me over the years, editors hate reading. They just hate it.
Yeah.
So you cannot flop a potential script in front of an editor and they look at it, they're not going to read it and say, this is wonderful. It's just never going to happen. You put 6 pages of art down and they know in a glance whether or not you can do it or not do it.
Right.
And so that I, played the percentages. I broke in as an artist. I presumed I wouldn't get to, write my own stuff up until I just started getting, drawing a page of art is tough. And the toughest thing, of course, is you do it. Let's say you can do a page a day. You get to the solving all the problems and the this and the that. And you get this wonderful page. But you got to get up the next morning and do the same thing again as if, the previous day never existed.
Some people love it.
Right. But it's too much work to devote to a bad script. I was getting, terrible script. Or
That's
not
true.
terrible, but just not what I wanted to do.
I tell every would-be comic creator, they say, how do I break into comics? And I tell them all, put out a comic. It's not that expensive. Even if you just go to your local FedEx and run it off in color, make one issue, if it's any good, if the art is any good, and you hand it to an editor, he'll read it.
Absolutely. Plus, if you then make it and go on to have a career, all the work and the expense you put into getting that, little as long as you held on to 1 or 2 of them, they're going to sell for a bundle later on because of their rarity. Remember when someone exposed Comics Buyer's Guide? Remember that? The printed newspaper for comics, where someone exposed a scam where a couple of creators would get together and put out like 1 or 2 issues of some just small throwaway thing. But then in the classifieds of Comic Buyer's Guide, as someone else, they'd say, I'm looking for a copy of this, and I'm willing to pay this much money for it. And no one knows what you're talking about. But then you release the you advertise the book itself. And all of these wheeler dealers say, wait a minute, I know someone that's offering, $8,000 for one of those copies. I'm buying it up at whatever and, turn it around. And of course it was a scam. It was like the same people saying, I would offer this much for it under a pseudonym, all that. You could get away with stuff like that back then when there was no internet and no way to tell who's doing the scam. But yeah, so those things you do, those low print run things, can pay off in the long run beyond just finding a doorway into a better career.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, did you and Mike meet when you were both doing stuff with Comico? Or
Bill contributed to Nexus.
Oh yeah,
it's got to have been in the Nexus days.
Yeah.
One hopes it was still during the time when Capital was publishing it, but it might have been.
I think you did a Tale of Dave.
Yeah,
Oh,
was that in the Capital or was that at First Comics? I think that was at First Comics.
I'd have to go look. I have complete sets of everything here. But
Yeah.
I have to, or else I could go online and say Bill Willingham Nexus strip, and it would pop up instantly.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was at First Comics by that time, because I know that when First Comics went under, and
they're bad.
Dark Horse, that they were going to reprint my story, and said something like, I got a message from some editor of Dark Horse, said, since this was done work for hire, you're not owed any money. I go, well, I never signed a work for hire thing. First Comics was terrible at getting that kind of paperwork done. I remember raising a stink, and you backed me, and Steve Root backed me and said, look, throw a little money his way for a reprint fee. And then I did. I got a little money, and that's all. I just wanted a token payment, but it came at the cost of a 2-hour tirade phone call from Mike Richardson. How dare I imply that he's like anti-creator rights or something like that. No such thing.
I have to say that the only reason Steve Root and I own Nexus is because Richardson returned the rights to us.
Oh, did he? See, I wondered how
he gave them full rights back. Yeah,
the rights out of First Comics.
Yeah.
Oh, First Comics never gives up anything, and I'm having a big fight with them right now over Badger.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that why the new First Comics, Ken, and whatever
Ken Levin has been involved since the beginning. Ken is now the publisher and the editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
And, Ken's not a bad guy. He's paid me for new Badger material, some of which has never appeared. But there's a big market out there for more material, and he tentatively gave me the right to crowdfund new material so he wouldn't have to pay for it if I got enough money. I just have to run the scripts by him. But I can never get him to read the scripts, so he hands them off to Alex Wald. Do you know Alex Wald?
Yes, Alex Wald is the only reason that anything can come out from the new First Comics, because you're right.
That's true. He's the only editor on hand. And we do have some material coming out. There's one series that's been in the works for 8 years, you can believe it or not. It's about a werewolf detective that Shane Oakley is illustrating. And it was delayed because Shane had endless physical problems with writing. He finally finished penciling it, and now we're getting it inked by Fur Calvi, and hopefully that'll be published next year.
Yeah. Early on, I saw one of the first Comics contracts, and it was creator owned, but in name only. Even I, as naive as I was early on, realized that you can't. That you're signing away your comic.
We were young and stupid.
I was young and stupid too. I went with Kamiko for Elementals. That was a better contract, although contracts aren't worth anything if the people that are working together on them are not trustworthy people. So.
Right.
That's right. Or as Sam Goldwyn would say, a verbal agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, unless you got the bucks, a written agreement isn't either. But sometimes you can, at least get some third party to agree. Well, it pretty clearly states this.
Well, I find Dark Horse very trustworthy and honorable.
Yeah. Good.
You know what? I was just thinking about what you're saying about like having the different versions of the same character. Obviously, we have that with all of the Marvel, DC, and things like that. But then you also have it. That's one of the things I think people enjoy about the public domain characters,
Yes.
and seeing how different writers or artists will portray them, whether it's Dracula or whether it's like some of the characters in Fables or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like that. I don't know, like that does seem to be a good kind of model, especially going forward, so different people can get, because everybody wants to complain about like I don't like this or I don't like that, because it seems like they're only allowed to put out one version. But yeah, being able to put out multiple versions.
The
Um,
the public domain is such a wondrous thing, and I don't think it would ever exist if it wasn't kind of the default setting. Like long before publishing existed, storytelling was just, you tell
yeah,
your stories, it goes from village to village, what have you. And of course, there's going to be changes. Um, but the public domain, every single human being in the universe, let's
right,
is born inheriting this vast treasure trove of all these stories that you can do with what you want. Um, how cool is that? We're born. Everyone is born rich. Now, functionally, not everyone gets to know that, and everyone has access to exploiting it. But at least the potential is there. I got to tell you, obviously, with Fables, I am. I am very dependent on the public domain and a big supporter, and um, have radicalized my opinions on intellectual property because of that. At the current setting, um, I have subscribed to the idea that if you create something IP, you get it for 20 years. For 20 years, you can exploit it. Before the 20 years is up, if you sell it to a third party, or is that a second party? Anyway, they can have it for a max of 10 years. That's it. And then it is automatically in the public domain. That would, it's never going to happen because there's too many companies that they exist to squat on things forever.
right,
Marvel, DC, Disney, Warner, and they've got the clout to keep fiddling with the copyright laws to just keep pushing that can down the road. So it's not going to happen. But God, how great would it be? It's like, yeah, you can buy this, but then you better get what you're going to get out of it in the next 10 years, because then everyone gets a shot. Going back to Dave Sim again, and I apologize if this is
no, it's fine.
theory, but what's not well known, because the only thing you're allowed to talk about Dave now is what a horrible person apparently is. But what's not well known is he was confident enough in his Cerebus story that he said, yeah, anyone who wants to do Cerebus can. He threw his stuff into the public domain
Wow.
voluntarily, because arrogant creator that he is that, yeah, I'm just betting that you do it, you don't do it, I can do it better. So you're never going to impact my ability to exploit this. I think you will note that there's been a few parodies of it,
Yeah.
but no one has ever just announced, okay, I'm going to come out with Cerebus.
Yeah.
Because I think he was right. It's like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that. Although I was tempted. But yeah, I forgot what we were talking about.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
We were
I
talking
go
about
off-
public domain and stuff like that. Yeah.
Public domain, right. So, yeah, obviously from Fables, public domain has been very good to me. I hope to be very good to it in the long run of my life.
When did you make the switch from doing writing and drawing, or drawing, to wanting to write more? And was it because you could, and I say this I say this as someone who, I kind of made the decision based on physical limitations, because I started having really bad arthritis and stuff. So I was like, let me start writing more than my drawing. But also you can, like, for me, I can get more done as a writer than I can as an artist because of all the detail or whatever. And like you said, that it takes so long with different days. But like, was that like a conscious decision, or just because of the projects, it's just worked out
It
that way?
eventually became that. Like I said, I early on in my career got tired. If I'm going to draw, I'm not going to waste it on bad scripts.
Yeah.
The first issue of Elementals, published by Texas Comics, which was actually going to be published by Noble Comics, who published the Justice Machine Annual, wherein Elementals first appeared. When Texas Comics got a hold of it, it was a comic company formed by a bunch of guys in the back of a comic shop who said, okay, we're going to do our own comics company. By the way, my advice to anyone thinking of going with a small unknown publisher, if you want to know whether or not this is a good deal, the first thing you want to do is see if they'll let you examine the books, to see if they actually have the money. Like, these guys did not have money, so they never actually published it. But anyway, first issue, they had a deal in place with one of their local bro guys down in Texas that said, you'll write the entire line of comics that we publish. So when I took Elementals, when Noble decided to just quit one day, said we can't afford to do this, took it down to those guys because I met them at conventions, and said, yeah, we're going to publish your comics. And I go, great. And here's what's going to happen in the first issue. Oh, no. Michael Wolf, nice guy, but he writes all of our stuff. You go, okay. So he wrote it. He wrote it based on since it was mostly drawn. So he just kind of, and I found it terrible. Not terrible because it was bad comics writing. It was like, no, this was not the series I created. So when Texas Comics went belly up, almost right away because they had no money, and I took it to Kamiko in Philadelphia. The first condition was, okay, it's mine. I will now write it. Or if I'm going to work with a writer, I was still not that confident in my writing ability. It's going to be my choice. I'm going to be the controller of whoever writes this. And they agreed. And I did learn to examine the books. It turns out that the money guy behind them was a physical therapist who was just rolling in it. And, he sponsored his brother's, this was Dennis Lasorda, the physical therapist, sponsored his brother Phil Lasorda's comic company and all this. So there was money. They paid their bills and lasted for a long time. Lasted right up until the time that they had a little bit of success and decided, we're a successful company, now let's just publish anything down the pike. The first comics, when I was trying to break in with them, because I was living close to them when they were just starting up, they had an ironclad rule that didn't last very long. There was an ironclad rule that says, we are a publisher of 6 comic books. That's it. Never more. Never more than 6 comic books. In order for, comic book number 7 to be considered by us, then one of the first 6 has to fail. And then, slowly, we will add, we'll become a publisher of 7 comics. Well, they had some early success, and that went right out the window. Now, luckily for us, some of those, well, let's add other things, turned out to be Nexus, it turned out to be Badger. But then there were things like wonderful books like Mars from Wheatley and Hempel, that it just, it was never going to find an audience, even though it was terrific stuff. But anyway, they abandoned that strict conservative, let's build this company in steps that we can absorb. And so many companies do. The black and white boom happened about that time. And every black and white, anything you could crap out onto paper sold.
Yep.
a minimum of 30, 40,000, and every single one of those, like two kids working out of their basement. Now suddenly they've got some money in their pocket. The first thing they did was, well, all my friends that I hang out with at the comic store, they have comics too. We're going to publish those, and it just flooded them. Anyway, tirade over.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, I have to plug my new project. It's
Oh, good.
It's a graphic novel called Thin Blue Line, about two police officers trying to survive the night in a riot-torn city. My penciler is a full-time police officer, and he still finished the job ahead of most pros.
Oh no!
It's on Indiegogo, Thin Blue Line graphic novel.
So as long as we're promoting stuff, I'm going to hold up Batman versus Bigby. The Fables universe crosses over with the DC universe. This thing I've been working on for years. When Fables first took off, and they said, "Is there any kind of deluxe spin-off thing you want to try now that we got a successful thing?" I said, "Yes, I want Batman and Bigby to cross over." And they would always laugh at the Vertigo offices. They would like, "Oh, okay, he's making a joke," because I'm a funny guy. They do artsy fartsy books. They do pouty lipped kids with nose piercings.
Right.
We don't do, superheroes. We don't do people in tight suits jumping off of buildings. But I just no, I like detective stories. As a matter of fact, I always think Batman should be a detective. I'm as happy with the grim dark stuff as anyone. But detective stories are hard to write. They're really hard to write, and I like them because they are about smart protagonists. Unless he's a failed detective, there's plenty of detective fiction in which the guy just stumbles from scene to scene until the villain reveals himself. Half of Spencer, I love the Spencer books, but oh my God.
There's a wonderful movie called The Kid Detective.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Go ahead.
It's about a boy who has a lot of luck as a detective when he's a child, and he becomes a celebrity in his hometown, and then he grows up to be a young man detective who can't get any work and is just flailing around. And then the big case drops in his lap, and of course it goes back to his childhood. It was very well put together. It's very funny until it's not, and then it's very grim, but it works.
Yeah, a lovely movie, and I like the realization that you kind of didn't so much solve that. You were a kid detective, and so that was a novelty, and so we embraced you. But you didn't really solve that first case so much as things happen, and you were the guy that said, "Oh, here's what happened." Yeah, I love that movie. It's great, and the realization that a kid detective is a novelty. A guy who used to be a kid detective, not so much. It's a Doogie Howser syndrome, which is, at some point that series lasted long enough to where his mom said, it's no longer a unique thing that you're so young and a doctor, so you better step it up there, buddy. Lovely movie, and I recommend it. Although, that clicks my what happens there. I want more with this kid. If you have a terrific story, I do always want more, which is why I'm great patting myself on the back. Better at writing epics. If I have to write a short, contained thing, not so much. And as a result of that, so much of what I've done in other people's playgrounds, like DCU, I wrote Robin for just over a year. I wrote the JSA for a year, a few other things. That first year is just for me to get the characters in the positions I need them to be to really start off. But there's someone else's toys. You don't have a guarantee that you're going to get all that time to tell the sweeping epic that you want to. You want to do sweeping epics, you better own and control your own stuff.
I'm
I
a
got to
big
do that.
believer in single issue stories.
I am too. They're tough. As a matter of fact, in the middle of Fables, just because I was terrible at it, we started doing uh, arcs of stories where they're 1 page, 2 page, 6 page stories, so that there's several in a given issue, just to force myself to be able to do that. And I loved it, but oh my God, was that work?
Well, you can tell a lot of story in 24 pages.
You can, or people with skill can. Me sometimes,
It
uh,
doesn't mean that every page is divided up into 9 panels. I'm sure you agree with me that a comic book story has a pulse and a feel to it, so that sometimes it expands for the big scene and then it contracts into smaller panels for the quiet
yeah,
scenes, and that not every explosion is worth a full page. Because if you've seen one explosion, you've seen them all.
right. As a matter of fact, explosions. Even though there's a few in Batman versus Bigby, so please do.
I was going to bring that up.
Explosions are not the interesting parts of a story for me.
No.
They can be oh my God, we have to do something, but the story is in the okay. What do you do? What's the thing you have to do now? Uh, yeah, and it is the pacing of a story is always going to be a something that I hope I get good at someday. My hope is that when I die, hunched over either my drawing table or my computer, uh, that I die still with the hope that maybe I'll figure out some of these things someday.
Speaking of explosions, I have to bring this up because I did read, since it was released yesterday. I did read Batman and Bigby #2.
Yeah.
And for people, just so they know, it is a 6 issue limited series.
Yes.
Second issue just came out, so it's not too late to jump on board. But I did love the next for the next issue of that. As you're seeing explosions happen, well, spoiler alert. As you're seeing explosions happen
There's
in
explosion.
Gotham, it says Night of Fire and Death, or if the pen is mightier than the sword, does that make books mightier than bombs?
Yeah.
Which I like. Yeah, I love that. Especially, it's a very explosive panel that's in too.
Yeah. And the nice thing, the explosions aren't a spoiler if
No,
they happen. The why
yeah,
they happen, that's the
right,
interesting
right,
stuff.
right.
He didn't give any of that away.
No,
As a matter of fact, I don't think the why makes it into issue 2. I think that is all part
no.
of issue 3. Um, so yeah, the stuff that um, let's go. Not to just completely suck up, but Nexus helped change my view of what comics can and should be, especially in the genre I love, superhero stuff, because it was superheroic in only the widest understanding of that definition. Um, but uh, things like the perfectly said line, you have no in the first thing an assassination spoilers takes place, and the wife or the girlfriend of the victim says, you had no right to do this. He was a good man, and all this. And Nexus, just before he takes his leave, said, "Well, I could convince you otherwise, but why? Why bother?" And right away, when I finally read it, I just, oh my God, that's now I need to know who this character is and what's going on here. And of course the beams of energy that blast the guy and then take three 90-degree turns to avoid the innocent victim
Thanks, Bill.
in
I
between.
wish you could see The experimental animation that I've seen for the proposed Nexus Netflix TV series, which is waiting in production limbo for a green light. But you'll be thrilled when you see that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I did see. Steve Rude paid to have
Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Hanna-Barbera-esque introduction to Nexus, the series done,
Yeah,
which I love.
he thinks the cartoon should look like that, but he's the only one.
Yeah, the Hanna-Barbera verse. Oh my God, how lucky are we that occurred for us at a certain time in our lives. Space Ghost and Johnny Quest and the Herculoids inform so much of what I think is just great about adventure fiction. Um, yeah, it irked me a bit when DC did the Hanna-Barbera verse, and they just made every wrong decision you could possibly make with those properties. But anyway, that's my opinion.
I enjoy. Well, I will say, I know what you're saying about the other stuff. I kind of enjoyed some of the crossovers they did.
They did. Well, see, you gotta love the crossovers. When I was one of the reasons that I have the Big Bad Wolf as my favorite fairy tale character of all time is that he was the first as a kid for me to realize, oh my God, is the Big Bad Wolf from Three Little Pigs the same one as from Red Riding Hood? And if so, that means all of this takes place in the same
Right.
fictional universe. I'm sure I didn't use those terms in my head, but that was my understanding. And then when I started reading in earnest, I used to only read comic books as a kid. And every time I was sick home from school, we had a huge family. So my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, but also a freelance accountant, so she would do the books of many companies, but at home. So she had a busy day. And so the bargain was always, look, at some point I'm going to go out and run the errands, groceries, what have you. I will pick you up some comic books if you just stay out of my hair, for the day. When you're sick at home, all the first kids, the older ones, they got all the tender care and all that kind of stuff. By the time, kid number 47 comes along, it was just like, yeah, just, I hope you survive, but stay out of my hair. One day, she broke the bargain. She did not come home with half a dozen comic books. She came home with a prose book, Return of Tarzan. And I said, you traitorous bitch. In whatever language was available to me at the time. The bargain was comic books. That day, I reread every comic I had. I did everything I could do, including sneaking out to try and watch some TV before reading a prose book, which is, you have to read those in school. You don't read those
Right.
at home. Finally, out of frustration, and I hated Tarzan. I hated Tarzan because he was this monosyllabic guy who was just like, he was just a jungle idiot who every dilemma he gets in is because he can't figure out why this got bad, this got good. I did not like the character, and I'd also, Johnny Weissmuller, my dad was his golf buddy for a while. So apparently as a kid, I freaked out when they put me in his arms because he had long Bible hair. No one did back then. But anyway, so I was not prepared to like this. Finally, out of frustration, I read this. Some of you will know the Return of Tarzan starts where Tarzan has been civilized. He's running around in a suit working for the French intelligence agency. And he can speak in full sentences and reason and stuff. And I go, oh my God, this is so good. So I began to read prose for fun. And the thing about Edgar Rice Burroughs is he was prolific, and every single one of his characters existed in the same fictional universe, which I loved. There were crossovers and slight indications, but that cemented my fact that if you do a shared universe of any kind, I'm there. I mean, that's one of my, you might fuck it up, you might not, but
There's a term for that. It's called the Wold-Newton universe.
Yes, yes, it is.
And it brings together the Man of Bronze, Doc Savage, Tarzan, Sherlock Holmes, and a number of great characters. And this was years before the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Philip Jose Farmer was one of the great creators in that field. Had a major influence on me. He wrote several Tarzan novels.
And Tarzan versus Doc Savage. And
yeah.
Yes. I love his stuff. I love the Wold-Newton universe, and all that kind of stuff. And I love the things where people show all the connections between, you know, this sitcom and whatever, to show that, like, it all happens in the same universe. Did you know the Dick Van Dyke Show takes place in the same fictional universe in which X-Files takes place?
No, I didn't know that.
It's all connected, and I could do it, but that would be the rest of the show. Yes. So I'm prepared to love all of that. So yeah, the crossover, like all of their stuff, which they did before. They did it was retitled, so I could never find it. When they first broadcast, they at least advertised it as Space Ghost's Greatest Adventure. And Space Ghost has an adventure where he ends up at the planet of the Herculoids and this and that, and then he splashes in or whatever on Earth. With the Moby Dick series, which is not one of Hanna-Barbera's, but it all takes place in the same thing, and not as far into our future as I thought it would. If they would have pulled that pin and crossover with Johnny Quest, I would have exploded as a kid. But anyway, they did it, and so yeah, DC did it, and it should have been great. It should have been great, and some of it's pretty good, but it's not great.
You did the crossover thing with the what's it called, The Greatest Adventure or whatever?
Yes. Nicky, the guy that runs Dynamite and made his fortune, Dynamic Forces, was selling comics on QVC or something like that.
Right.
He was a kid in Philadelphia when I was in Philadelphia. There was just like, you know, the annoying kid that's always at every comic shop? They're assigned. One annoying kid for a comic shop. Well, he was the one, and he wasn't as annoying as some of those. But it's kind of like a little kid that wanted to hang out with, you know, the pros that were in Philadelphia at the time. Right. And since Philadelphia was ostensibly the home of Kamiko, it was actually a little town outside. But anyway, that was our comic shop hangout, and he would pester us. Well, apparently he had fond memories of that because he made his fortune and, you know, made a company and said, do anything with us, do anything. And I didn't want to do a lot of stuff where I had to absorb the continuity of all the stuff, the characters they were doing. So we worked out a thing where I do new versions of every single character that they've got control of. And we did Legendary. Legendary, Derry, a place. Right. And we had the Phantom, and we had Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon. We had Zorro. It's like cross all of these characters. Or Red Sonja.
Right.
So I did it, and I did it because in order to make it work in the same universe, these were different versions of each of these characters. So I had to be beholden to no previous continuity, and that worked out kind of fun. And they didn't the rights holders that had to approve every step, they were kind of like, yeah, that sounds cool, that's great. That worked out well. I guess it sold well enough to where he said, you want to do it again? And between the time that we did Legendary and this, all the Burroughs characters became available.
Right.
So he asked, do you want to do Legendary too? And you can add in the Burroughs characters. Well, if the Burroughs characters are available, no. I want to do all the Burroughs characters in the ERB universe the way he intended. And it was fun to do. I did not get any pushback from the rights holders or what have you. But it was so damn intimidating. I mean, Burroughs looms large in my personal mythology. Right. And I don't think I wrote a word of that without thinking that his ghost was looking down in disapproval on me, said, "Oh, I would have done this or I would have done that." But the idea was all the Burroughs characters in a shared universe, which is how he had it,
Right.
and finally do the Tarzan goes to Mars thing that he never got around to, various other things, but also the obscure characters. I wanted the girl from Hollywood, who it was just a Burroughs rant against the iniquities of Hollywood as Tarzan things were being made then. Everything else, Julian from the Moon Maid series and Pellucidar and the now I'm spacing it. Not the Outlaw of Torn, which was a period piece. Although I was going to get one of his ancestors in there, never worked out. But some of the Mucker, anything I wanted was going to go in this, and then obviously, what do you get them to do? You do the Golden Fleece. You get the greatest heroes of all these worlds together on a boat, off on an adventure. It's almost impossible for me to reread that, because all I can see is like, oh, I didn't do right by these characters. I should have done this better. There's one line I'm still proud of, where at some point the group is split up and a person of low character has Jane in custody or in companion, whatever, and they're walking across trying to get to a place where they're going to meet up their ship and be rescued. And he's being impolite to Jane. And Tarzan's son Korak is along with them. He's off hunting for food at the moment, but he's with this group of survivors. And Jane says something to the effect of, he's being very impolite to her. He's saying, you talk to me that way. If you keep doing it, especially when my son comes back, you're probably going to... My son did not earn the nickname Korak the Killer because of all of the enemies he let live. Which I thought was I blew it. It's better written.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. It always is.
But there's one line in there that I can still look at and say, yeah, I'm proud to have written it. And I think, if there's any wink and smile from the Ghost of ERB, that was it. But yeah, legendary. It was I don't know if I'll ever get to write these characters again, so why not write every single one of them? Attempt. Yeah. Which was a stupid thing to try and do, because I don't think I gave enough to each character. But it was pretty good. It was pretty fun. Yeah. Even as I hated everything I wrote as I wrote it. In the height of the remember early online communities where it was all message boards.
Yeah.
So they'd cut out letters pages for the most part in comics by that time. So I had my Fables message boards, and I had the crew, a bunch of regulars there, but a select crew on a private part of that their whole responsibility was to be my memory, to keep track of the stuff that, this thing was so complex and so sweeping. Yeah. By the time you got into the hundreds of issues, to where, you have to help me remember, I can't use that character, he died, or this person hates this person for this reason, that type of thing. Having a coterie of fans that they help you remember stuff. I know in the Game of Thrones books that George Martin has his group that are the continuity cops. Back in the comics days, E. Nelson Bridwell for DC, and I'm not sure if Marvel had a specific. The person that knows every single thing that's ever been done with every character. Those people come along rarely. I remember one of my few times writing for Marvel, where I wanted to use the villain group AIM, which stands for Advanced Idea Mechanics, rather than Hydra. Hydra was the thing used for it. So I wanted a bunch of acerbic AIM people. That one of the aspects of AIM is they hated those pissants in Hydra who were, getting all the new whatever.
Right.
But there was some bragging in that. We created the cosmic cube. We invented MODOK and all this kind of stuff. The editor on that got a hold of me. He's like, "Did they really do this?" I had no idea that it's like, oh my God, what has happened to the continuity of information in that company? Yeah, use fans to help you remember stuff. I have all of my volumes of this and that available to me, but some of them are too you have to kind of know where some information is and what volume.
Yeah,
you can have a chance of finding that stuff, unless you have someone smart and young to coordinate that. A book which I will promote.
Yeah.
If I could get a copy in front of you. It's called Just Another Ranker. It's military fantasy. It is
Cool.
a rifle company in a fantasy world. They're mercenaries. Hold on.
Yep.
Yes. All right. I'm holding this up. Just Another Ranker from the Adventures of Johnny Under. He always wanted to, like John Carter of Mars, go to a fantasy world of adventure. He never expected that he would be rejoining the military to do it. But it's a mercenary rifle company in a fantasy world. Just the names and the ranks and the structure of platoons and things like that. I could never keep track of them. So my dear editor Megan has this huge volume of this person is in this company, this platoon, hates John, whatever. She did all of that for me, and that's a godsend because by the end of it, it was a big. I do my version of the Battle of Rorke's Drift, where a few of them hold out against overwhelming odds of the enemy, and I was trying to wave after wave. Okay, who died in this wave and what happened? She helped me keep track of that so that I could finally finish the thing. Having that person is invaluable.
Yeah,
must have been nice for Nexus because he basically, except for the people back at home base, he killed everyone else he met.
Yeah, exactly.
Something I never understood. When I pitched Fables to DC, they wanted it to be a 6-issue miniseries because, as one of the editors, I will not shame her by naming her, but said, "Can we do it a 6-issue? Because I can't see how you can get more than that out of this premise." And my mind just boggled. How can you not see the potential of this? There's a writer that used to do a funny reading at conventions. It may have been Piers Anthony or Jack Chalker, one of those guys that was just prolific in the fantasy thing. But got assigned an editor once who was a radical, you cannot use animals for your beasts of burden advocate. So she just, in a fantasy story, edited out horses. Any horse that was used for riding and or pulling a wagon was just edited out, but edited out in such a way that where, the wagon was being pulled down the road by forces like it's just the wagon's heading down the road, but there's
magic
no pulling it. And all these knights and stuff we're getting around somehow, but it's a he'd have us in stitches with his readings of her editing before he went back and said, "This person is insane. Give me an actual editor."
Is there a good place for people to find you online?
A good place online. I have Twitter, which is at Bill Willingham.
That's the one.
And I've just started a Substack, which is my
I get your Substack.
yeah is my preferred place to actually enter. Twitter limits the interaction you can have.
Yep.
Which is good because Twitter is a horrible, horrible place.
I call it a cesspool of hatred.
Yeah, it is.
Doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be, but
It doesn't have to be.
It often is, but not for me. I mean, I play it safe on Twitter.
Well, yeah, you stay out of the fights. I Twitter for light interaction.
Right.
And I have Substack, which is the title of my webzine or newsletter or whatever is These Foolish Games, from the Jewel song, but talking about the foolish games of the publishing industry, the gaming industry, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The storytelling industry. And you can find that at Bill Willingham, all one word, .substack.com. And that, I've just started it. But that's where, if you want more in-depth interaction, that's the place to go.
Thank you for appearing with us,
Cool.
Bill.
Yeah. I tell you, Mike, you were one of the real influences that made me realize I need to do this for a living. I need to tell stories in the comic format. And I don't need to do it through Marvel and DC. But there are alternatives. Now, it's sort of like, well, these comics don't matter. They aren't from a real company. And not until I finally, out of desperation, I actually ran out of things to buy at Forbidden Planet before I finally realized, okay, I'll buy the Nexuses, I'll buy some of these other things and see if any of these guys are hiring. And well, as long as I'm going to try and use you guys to break into the industry, I might as well read what you've written. And then these to be just wonderful stories. And suddenly it's like, oh, well, these are comics too, in the sense that they don't have to be, just from these two companies. And it's weird. Growing up, I knew this because back then there was Gold Key and there was Western.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, Nexus is one of the big characters, since you're continuing to do it, if you need a short story, because I've gotten very slow as an artist. Done some time, it would be great.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I did a Tale of Dave, and Dave is a great character, but that's like doing something in the Tarzan universe and not getting to draw Tarzan. I mean, come on. Anyway,
all right.
It's been my pleasure. I hope I was not boring. I ramble.
No, you weren't.
No.
Okay.
We'll edit it down to about 15 minutes.
There you go. Well, good. When you edit things down, I become very erudite. Thank you very much for having me. I love being had.